Hi everybody, Dr. Dave Hayes, and my short rant for September 13th continued to be focused on the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And the report, the point here is that the counteroffensive is continuing in the south. And so we could just say, meanwhile, back in Kershon. Now, 3 quick points before we go to the maps, right? Ukrainian counteroffensive is continuing in the south, and we may be ignoring what's going on there because much as we ignored or didn't see what was going on in the north because we were focused in the south, now that we're focused in the north, hey, what are we missing down south? Fortunately, the good folks at ISW report on the whole campaign, and so we've got some insights there. Key things, too, I'm pulling out, I really think one significant impact of all of this success for Ukraine may be that the Russians' ability to use and raise volunteer battalions is impaired. Now, there may be a backlash to that, right? If they can't go with the plans they have, Putin may withdraw his self-imposed restraint that they not fully mobilize. But in the short run, I think this is a very significant thing that they are going to impact the ability to raise and use these volunteer battalions. And also, it looks like the Russian occupation is on shaky ground. It was always shady, right? But it's now on shaky ground. The referendum is on hold, and you can't be really enthused about being a occupation person at this point. But hey, let's go to the maps. Okay, actually, let's go to the map because I'm going to try to keep this shorter. We're looking here again. The information from ISW, Institute for Study of War, can be found at understandingwar.org. These are their maps. This is they're my primary source, as they are the primary source for, it seems, a lot of news outlets. When I read the news, I hear the stuff reflected a couple days later in news reporting. And so I think those guys are really leading our perception of that. That may be a single point of failure. That's always a concern, but they seem to have the good information. And they're the ones who are saying, hey, what's going on in the south, right? As things are being reported up north, they're saying, hey, down south, we still see fighting. And let's zoom in here. Okay, now this is Kershon down here, right? And the Dnipro River runs, it's very thick here, but it runs through here, and there's several bridges, right? We see a lot of fighting. There continues to be fighting. There are penetrations being reported, a few kilometers in areas, and there are reports that units in here, especially the Ukrainian Separatist units, are, sending out feelers. They're unconfirmed reports, but ISW is reporting the unconfirmed reports that these guys are sending out feelers for surrender. And I think one thing that complicates the operation down here is this river, right? The Dnipro River is a major obstacle, and it's going to be very difficult for Russian troops to flee. They certainly aren't going to be able to flee without somebody noticing it. So, the command has got some control on them. And if they're not ready to leave, then the troops will find it difficult to flee on their own. And it's just in general going to make things more complicated because the Ukrainians have been attacking these bridges, and they just aren't up to, they aren't as good as they used to be. We are hearing, though, about there is fighting, and the folks at ISW, in looking at these things, they get reports. For instance, there's a town here that they got reports the Russians are fleeing, and they looked at satellite images and said, yeah, there used to be a lot more military vehicles in town. We can only count 4 now, right? And so they're like, maybe these reports are true, right? ISW always tries to confirm things. And the thing is that one of their takes on it is that, look, it can't be the psychological effects of what's happening up north. It is more likely that all the, that the weaknesses here, the things we're hearing, are the effects of the fighting, right? That the Ukrainians are in fact pressing them, and they're pressing them hard enough to drain their morale and to make them feel that their position is desperate. And they've had major units. There are reports of a naval brigade being 85% ineffective, and so there's a lot of smoke coming out of here, right? And we're not seeing much of it, right? Again, we're not seeing the fighting, but it's happening. Also, I find this very interesting. Down in Kershon, the Russian occupation authorities are setting up checkpoints and all this other stuff. Motorcycles and mopeds are vanishing, though, right? And presumably Russian troops or separatist troops are stealing them. Kind of reminds me of when the Germans fled from, I think it was Denmark, but one of those countries up there that they'd occupied. As the Canadians moved in, the German soldiers stole everyone's bike, right, to flee. And so mopeds and motorcycles, I hear those are going missing, and I think two things. One, that is very much an everyman, or maybe me and my buddy, but it's kind of an everyman for himself scenario. Or it's not a truck, it's not a bus, right? Also, though, it gets over a bridge, right? From seeing some of the pictures of the bridges, you can still thread your way across. They just have big holes in them. And so it's the kind of thing that can get across a damaged bridge. So we got this idea that there's this weakness here. So I really think we need to be watching this, right? This is where the action is going to go. And so I think the folks at ISW are, thank you for drawing our attention to this, right, is one thing. The other thing is these reports of the volunteer battalions, right, that they're not being able to be used. And, that is, I pretty much already covered that at the beginning, but that is significant in that, they've got this whole Third Army Corps that they raised and the Russians raised and were going to use. And now it looks like they're not sure. And, this is something that these are not well-trained troops. They have the sense of being volunteers. And so you've kind of, they're not in the normal Russian military. So they may have more of a feeling that they have the right to say, no, we're not going to do this. And that'll be, if they can't raise, first of all, these guys were never going to be good. These guys were probably going to fall apart. And if they're now not trustworthy, I think it's going to pull the rug out from under the fourth generation efforts of the Russians, which were never going to be very good either, right? I mean, that was the thing, is they've really chewed up their training base. They form battalion tactical groups out of regiments, and which has 3 battalions basically in it, and then it has a whole bunch of artillery, other stuff, lots of other support battalions, but you would form 1 battalion out of a regiment. Well, the Russians did that for the initial fight, and then they needed more troops, so they formed a 2nd battalion out of that. Now they're eating into and I've heard they've tried to go in and do more. And the thing is, they've just, their plan for raising their army is that recruits go to these units and get their final training. After getting initial training, they go to these units and they get trained up in the regiment. Well, the regiments, there's not much there anymore. They've deployed practically everything. So they've eaten up their training base. They're going to have trouble generating forces. Also, the Russian occupation forces are going to have a really tough time. Morale is hitting them. And there's reports that, as the Ukrainians go in up north and identify collaborators, and they're talking about using facial recognition and all these other things, it's going to make it more difficult to get Ukrainians to cooperate with the Russian occupiers, and the occupiers may be looking over their shoulder a lot more. So I really think that, that's another strategic impact, and partisan activity is probably going to increase and be more effective in that situation. So bottom line, though, or the top line, I guess, is we need to watch the South. This is where we may see some movement, and this is where the offensive continues to go. Thank you for watching my short rant. I hope it was short and not too much of a rant. I'm Dr. Dave Hayes, and though I teach at Troy University, this video is my own work. Troy University has neither approved nor reviewed the content. So there. And if you want to learn more about Troy anyway, figure out who would hire a guy like this, you can always go to www.troy.edu. I also am going to have a little card popping up here that you can go see my bio and some information about where I teach, which will descend to shameless self-promotion. But I want more students. What can I say? And finally, the music you've been listening to is Tonight at 8 by Shane Ivers.
So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll come back and enjoy another short rant.